I think we are live or about to be, so I'm tempted to use the same strategy as I used in Force Them to be dancing around. Yeah, I can see myself in the OpenTech Will Save Us room. So here it is, OpenTech Will Save Us is back. It's been a year since the last episode. It feels good to be back and to talk about interesting things. For people who are discovering OpenTech Will Save Us, it's a show to shed a positive light on open source software and mostly on how it has a positive social impact, so how it helps people. The theme of today is self-hosting for individuals. So it's a very large theme. We could have spent a whole day on that. Self-hosting is both easy and difficult. Sometimes it's necessary for some people. It's easy to put services online, but it can be difficult to maintain them in the long term. It can be self-hosting for organizations, but it can be for individuals too. In some cases, some vendors do self-hostable software for both of individuals and organizations. But people and organizations don't have the same resources. We can't have the same expectations, and we can't expect the same outcomes of somebody self-hosting their own software on their Raspberry Pi and a full-fledged team hosting a service. So software needs to be able to accommodate who it's designed for. So today our guests are Jos from Nextcloud, who is going to have a nice conversation with us about how they make software which is both for enterprise and individuals, I believe, and how to find the balance between the two, because it's not necessarily easy. Then we have Alexandre and Gauthier, who are working on YunoHost, the distribution to make self-hosting easier for organizations and individuals. And then finally, we'll conclude with Neil Alexander, who is working on Matrix P2P and who will be telling us why it's awesome, why it's going to save the world, and why it takes time to be delivered, and what challenges we face to be able to deliver proper P2P experience. Jos, let's start with you. So not everyone might know what Nextcloud is, as popular as it is. Can you describe what it is and what it does?
All right, let me try to, give a short summary. So Nextcloud, well, I think our friends from Gartner, they call it a content collaboration platform, which says both everything and nothing, I suppose. It's a platform like an application you can run on your own server that can store your files, store your calendars, contacts, chat, video calls. It can do document editing. It can do about 300 other things, I could claim, because there are 300 apps in our app store, more or less, who are add things like a Kanban board with deck, or a forms, that you can do surveys, send links to people with forms. Like a whole host of different things. So the idea behind Nextcloud is that you host your own file sync and share and collaboration, service. And that can be as a home user or as a small business or a big business. Can be as a hosting provider, can be as a telecom provider, like all of these, exist and use Nextcloud. I think that's kind of short of it. I mean, it's of course open source. We don't do any hosting, so there is no I don't want to say conflict of interest, but keeps it simple. We just make the software and make it as good as possible, and you host it yourself. Behind Nextcloud is of course a big community of people, as well as a company. The company is completely self-funded, so no venture capital that twists motives a little bit around. It's completely open source. We don't do open core, which again twists motives around a little bit sometimes. And we're all open source people for a long time. A lot of people in Nextcloud come from the KD community, at least in the beginning. These days, well, it's for all communities, and I shouldn't forget GNOME there. But yeah, also all kinds of other communities and places and walks of life, so to say.
Yeah, and I think somebody who is working for Nextcloud is Carl, who is the maintainer of NeoChat, which is a Matrix, a KDE's Matrix client. So you mentioned, so sometimes we can read that Nextcloud is a productivity suite. It's for collaboration. Is it more for the enterprise or more for individuals, self-hosting people?
Yeah, more. What is more? So most Nextcloud servers on the internet, there are a few 100,000 on the web. Most of them are run by private users, either at home or at a VPS or the provider. But given there are Nextcloud deployments out there with millions, tens of millions of users, which are pretty much those are customers typically. Most users are not hosting themselves and are on a for-profit, so to say, Nextcloud server. So I don't know. How do you want to answer it? Both, I guess.
Right. So there is a community with many individuals self-hosting it and many organizations self-hosting it.
Exactly.
I guess you are not snooping on people to have a good idea of who is doing what with Nextcloud.
No.
One of the questions I often ask to people when they produce open source software is how do you survive? Because you are doing software that can be downloaded and installed for free. How do you survive? How do you make money
Crazy, right?
with that product?
Yeah, it's nuts. Yeah. Look, the thing is, and this, of course, when we talk about self-hosting, we get to the point that running your own server is hard. Running it for 5 million users is very, very hard. And also, if you run it for 5 million users, it's very expensive if it goes down and it stays down for a week. Or, if you lose 10% of your data, you don't want that. So you want to run an enterprise build supported by the people who, built the software. And that's kind of the long and short of our business model. So we don't monetize private users, and we don't do hosting. We purely work either with businesses that want to host for other people, and it can be, mid-sized businesses who want to help bigger companies to run their own Nextcloud in their own data center, or companies that want to host for them, or companies that want to host for private users. B2B, B2C. It's all. If you want to run a Nextcloud server at a scale that you think, if this doesn't work, I have a problem. I might need to be looking for another job if I don't fix it quick. Then you should talk to us for some job insurance. That's the short of it.
So you are basically making money by selling support to enterprises and professional services as well to develop new features.
When I say support, we call it Nextcloud Enterprise, which is essentially a build of Nextcloud that has gotten extra testing, releases a bit slower, etc. And as customer, you get security information and patches before we release them publicly. It's not that we delay security patches for everybody else, by the way. It's just that we have a predictable release cycle, and most security patches simply go in that release cycle, but our customers get it earlier already so they can patch their systems. While, of course, if there's a really big security problem, we might do an extra release. Seriously, if you run an Nextcloud server, keep it up to date, because when we release the update, we of course tell everybody to update, but we don't give details of the security fixes, because that's just telling the bad guys that how they can hack the system. So you should also always stay up to date. And this is, of course, also true for our customers, but they have a heads up and they have a bit more information, which is, again, if you're running for a large number of people, if you're a telecom provider, you're responsible for the data of hundreds of thousands, millions of customers. I mean, it would be irresponsible. And also from a compliance point of view, just, I think, not really acceptable if you wouldn't, have a contract like this to make sure that your data is secure. And so for that service, yes, the customers pay. We aim for bigger companies. I think we do sell starting at 100 users, but that's not really our target. user base. We really aim for companies with 1,000 plus employees or accounts. But the real target is even bigger. Universities with hundreds of thousands, or telcos, or yeah.
All right. And you released Nextcloud Hub 2, I think, not so long ago. And one of the features that got me really excited about that was P2P backup. Can you tell us a bit more about what P2P backup is and who it is for?
Yeah, absolutely. After I do that, I will also get to another feature that I think is interesting for a lot of people, which is our all-in-one Docker container. But let me first talk about the P2P backup. I mean, the name is, it's not peer-to-peer as in an automated peer-to-peer, Napster-like network, to be clear. The goal is to have a backup app where you pretty much just give account details on another Nextcloud server, let's say the one of a friend or family, and then your instance backs up to the other one with encryption and compression, etc. That's it. It's about backing up to another Nextcloud server. It can do more. You can back up to any external storage, so you can also back up to an FTP drive or to I think even object storage, like any external storage is supported. But the primary use case, of course, another Nextcloud server, because, well, it's fairly simple, right? You have, let's say, a Raspberry Pi. You connect two 4 terabyte hard drives. 1 terabyte hard drive you fill up with your data. The second one, you then keep for the data for somebody else, and then you make a deal with them. You say, okay, I back up to you, and you also have a Raspberry Pi with 2 drives. And that way, the data of both people is safe, even in the worst case that, somebody invades your country and burns down your house.
Right. And so that's something which is useful for individuals, obviously, because most individuals don't have the same, some self-hosters don't have a backup policy at all, which is pretty frightening. But not everyone is a professional. So sometimes you just don't know that you need to have backups. But do enterprises rely on this P2P backup software too?
No. This is definitely not made for enterprise. Nextcloud has a very standard architecture. It's a really typical LAMP or some variant on that stack. So it's a very, we take great care in making sure that it's a standard PHP app. So basically every company, with a couple of sysadmins will have the expertise to run it competently and securely, and also scale it up. So it scales like any PHP app, and that makes it easy to scale, to some degree. Of course, PHP also has its limits there. Databases and file systems do. PHP, of course, scales forever. So you can basically back up Nextcloud as any, PHP app as you would. And big companies do and should. This peer-to-peer backup is definitely not designed for backup at scale. It's really for private users, maybe a small business, and then, I mean, really small, like 5 people kind of business. Bigger than that, I would say, look, at that point, either you make sure you have a sysadmin, and I mean, they should know how to use a backup app. If you don't, then you should honestly be using a hosted service from, maybe one of our partners. There are plenty. And and otherwise, maybe you shouldn't, try this. A bigger, definitely not.
Right. So you said earlier that you are not monetizing individual user and basically any deployment that is less than 100 users. So why developing P2P backup for individuals? Does Nextcloud have anything to gain in serving individuals, in accommodating individuals, when it's mostly targeting enterprise? Or are you doing that just because you are nice people?
Yeah, there are 2 ways of answering that question. Look, we started Nextcloud, the company. I mean, a lot of people probably, who even some who are watching, know us. We started this because we saw, that there was a problem developing, right? So Frank announced in 2010 already, kind of the precursor to Nextcloud, basically saying, look, we are, it was at the KD conference, and he was at the KD board at the time, I believe. And his story was basically, look, we are developing a wonderful Linux desktop, and we're building this, this open source operating system that gives you control over what you're doing on your computer. But if you want to store your data and share it with other people, you have to give it to Microsoft, Google, etc. This is a problem. We need to build an alternative. And this is, of course, how it started. And so this is still what's driving us at a personal level. We recently did a survey internally, and everybody who filled it in pretty much said some variation on their motivation of, I care about privacy. For democracy, we need to control our data. And anything in between those things. So at a personal level, we care about this, and we want to make sure that people can, run a Nextcloud easily, safely, etc. Of course, you can also take a slightly more cynical look, like we are running a business. Now, as I said, we don't have venture capital, so there's nobody we need to make rich in 3 years or something like that. All the money is reinvested in the company, and we are profitable. However, of course, as a business, you need to also think as a business. Otherwise, well, you can't really compete with the likes of Microsoft, right? If you're too small and you stay small, then you can't compete with these big players. And so the more businessy look at it would say, well, those 200, 300, 400,000 servers that are running Nextcloud for private users, they are also a way to make a journalist, for example, want to write about Nextcloud, because a lot of people are interested in Nextcloud. They want to learn about Nextcloud. So if we didn't take care of private user things, then journalists wouldn't want to write about Nextcloud. Maybe those people wouldn't say positive things about Nextcloud that would impact our business. Because it's not like we're going to do Google ads, We're not the kind of company that says like, oh, we're pro-privacy, we don't want tracking. But yeah, let's do Facebook ads. We don't do any of these things, so we need to make our money by basically having people recommend Nextcloud to other people, and some of these people being at a big company that needs our services. This is our entire business model. So if we wouldn't occasionally do things for home users, well, then our business model wouldn't work either. So, you can say it's the goodness of our heart, or you can say it's the business model, and otherwise Nextcloud wouldn't exist anymore. It's both true, I suppose.
All right. Just a side note for everybody who is watching the stream. If you are in the Open Tech Will Save Us Matrix room, you can ask questions. I'm bombarding Jos with questions, but feel free to ask your own. I'm going to read them and to ask them to Jos eventually. Yes, you told earlier that you wanted Nextcloud to be easy to deploy for many people, but one thing myself, I'm guilty of forgetting sometimes, is not everyone is a computer science person. Not everyone is an engineer. Not everyone is a self-taught sysadmin. For some people, a Raspberry Pi is just a sort of tiny computer that does weird things. Is it possible for individuals who are not, I'd say, computer specialists, who want to evade surveillance capitalism to get an Nextcloud instance? Do you have so you are not providing SaaS, but you have partners or a network that can allow people to do so?
Right. So let me first go to the thing I mentioned earlier, which is our all-in-one Docker container. So for us, since we started our company and our community, it's always been super important that Nextcloud is easy to run. Yeah. And I already mentioned it's just a PHP app, which makes it easier also for home users, not just for businesses, of course, but also for home users. Nextcloud is relatively easy to install and run. Also at a very cheap, crappy hosting provider, because at least they will support PHP and MySQL. And again, that's all you need for Nextcloud. And we also still support like SQLite. You can say, who would want to run SQLite? Well, actually, maybe you don't. But if you really just need a very simple Nextcloud, you need zero configuration for SQLite. You don't need to make a user in the database and configure a password or anything. It just works. And that is obviously incredibly nice. So we really put in some effort there to even support something like that. But what we have also recently done, and it was introduced the same release as Nextcloud Backup, was to introduce an all-in-one Docker container. Now, there's been a Nextcloud Docker container for a long time, but it's a pretty advanced Docker container. It's maintained by a whole bunch of community members, and they're doing an awesome job. But the thing is, if you want to run the Docker container, then bring your own Apache, pick a storage solution. You can also choose for Nginx, and you need to also run a database container. And if you want Redis, if you even know what it is, you need to take care of that. Like it's pretty hard. Like for me, this actually wasn't an option. I run Nextcloud on an old server, but I'm not an advanced user. And for me, it was actually simpler to just set up an Apache with MySQL and just drop the files in the folder and have it work. Docker's supposed to make things, well, at least I think it's supposed to make things simpler, but I know some people think it's supposed to make things scalable. We can debate it over a beer. In any case, we thought there should also be a way to use Docker to make Nextcloud really easy. Now, there has been a snap for a very long time, and the snap is really snap install Nextcloud, and boom, you've got a running Nextcloud on your system. And this is really awesome. But not every NAS can run Snap, right? But most of them can run Docker. And there are other places where Docker is just a better solution. So we decided, okay, let's build a Docker container where you do Nextcloud install, or Docker install, or I don't even know how. I think it's Docker install or Docker run or something. Nextcloud-AIO, AIO all in one, and it works. And this is essentially what we've made. It asks you a few questions, and then in the Docker container, it will run, your database and all the other servers. It's completely set up with all the features with Collabora online for document editing, Nextcloud Office, I should say, and all the other features. And it can update itself, or you can go in and you can say click, click, click for each of the servers to update them. Easy to use. Less headache. So, when you are not very technical, but you have a NAS on which you can run Docker images, this is the Docker image to run on there. However, if you say, well, I might have a NAS, but I will still need to open ports in my firewall and set up a dynamic DNS, and I don't even know what either of these things mean, and I totally get it because it's a pain in the behind, then we actually have another thing that we have built a couple of years ago. We call it simple sign up. So the thing is, there are a lot of companies that are offering Nextcloud hosting for private users, and they give you like a gigabyte for free, which is really cool. But then you need to, I don't know, maybe go to a list of Nextcloud providers, and then you need to pick one. And then you need to go there and figure out how to sign up and like go through all these steps. While, if you want Dropbox, how do you do that? You download the app, you enter email address, you enter a password, you click on the login button, and you have a free account with, I think, 2 gigabytes. And that's it. That's it. There's no more. You need to approve your email address, maybe with a link and email and all that stuff, but it works. Yeah. So as an open source community, as privacy aware community, as self-hosting community, don't we want the same thing? I think we do. So we kind of managed to make that, and it's called simple sign up, and it works exactly like this. You download the Nextcloud app, you say sign up. Okay, I should have said that step, but you have that with Dropbox too, right? You give an email address, you choose a password, and you're logged in a free account with between 2 and 5 gigabytes of storage, and that's it. Now, obviously, what happens on the back end is a lot, and it's a bit more complicated, because what we do is we then pre-select a provider that is part of the simple sign-up program that is local to you, so closest to you. So we simply look at your, geo location of your IP address, and we pick a provider, and in between the step of entering your email address, you can choose a different one. If you think, well, yeah, but I want with this one, it's just click from the list and then you pick that one. And then the moment you then enter the email address and you click next, we transfer you don't see it, but we are actually transferring you to the provider. So at that point, all we did is hand you over to the provider that you picked actively or passively, and there you create a password, and then you log in there, and then it communicates with the app and it sets everything up. We are no longer involved. We don't even got your email address at this point. That went all with JavaScript, purely client side. We have no information from you, nothing. You are fully decentralized, yet through a single portal, centralized, set up at your own now new fresh Nextcloud account. So that's kind of the simplest way of getting Nextcloud up and running.
I really like it because as somebody who is around the Matrix community, one of the things the Matrix.org Foundation does not want to become is to become the Gmail of Matrix. So one of the problems with email is that 90% of people are on Gmail.
Right.
And when you have federated services or even just decentralized services, it's clearly something you want to avoid. So I really like the solution you found. That's maybe there is one big entry to the network in a way, even if it's not necessarily a network. And then you can be dispatched to various providers. I find it to be a very elegant solution.
It's, by the way, completely open source. You can download the code of this thing if you want and, use it for Matrix.
Excellent. I know a few people are going to be interested in that.
It's part of our website, which itself is completely in GitHub because we're kind of crazy. I would not recommend that, by the way. That's a little over the top, but yeah, we've been maintaining our website in GitHub, so.
Right. And we have an interesting question in the chat from Kai, who is asking, do the participating companies have to adhere to some standards regarding the terms and services?
Yes. So we check the terms of services. Not like we don't spend a huge amount of time on it. We just do a basic check. They have to tell us if they change them, and then we check again. They also have to provide like a certain level of service. They have to upgrade in a decent time. They have to have at least some security, knowledge. They have to have you can't sign up as a single person in the basement, but you have to have an actual company with at least, I don't know, something like six employees, I believe we want. You need to exist for a couple of years. We have a list of requirements. So there is a certain standard of quality. It's still, no guarantees, right, from our side. Again, you have no relation with us. We just redirected you to somebody. But we try and keep at least a certain level of standard, a certain level of quality there. But yeah, it's basic.
Yeah, I can understand that it has some overhead to maintain such a network of partners. Right. So I understand that you cannot afford to do a full audit of the company every time somebody wants to adhere to the program.
Yeah, to be clear, not all of them are partners, right? So if you're an Nextcloud partner, an actual signed contract kind of partner, yes, you can be part of simple sign up. But if you're not, there's a number of companies that are not partners. So there is a single letter of contract, nothing legal in place. We can't guarantee anything there. Because it's the nature of decentralization, right? I mean, I don't feel we're the ones who are supposed to be policing things to too high a degree.
Yes, it can be difficult sometimes to find a good balance between doing some expectations management for users who want a standardized product and to have a product which is decentralized and you don't have a centralized control over all the instances that are running in the wild. So yeah.
Oh yeah. Difficult. I get private people sometimes ask me on Twitter if I can reset their password.
I hope not.
I need to explain. No, yeah, exactly. I would know where to begin, right? Like I need to explain decentralization at that point and say, I have no access to your server. I don't even know where it is. I know nothing. This is, of course, I don't know. I think some of the big tech companies and the whole surveillance capitalism has created this expectation of free, and this expectation free, right? I mean, we all know you're paying with your data and your privacy, and in some cases with your bloody democracy. Let's not go there these days because it's not a fun subject at the moment. So yeah, there's some education needed, and I mean, hey, we do our best, but we can't fully fix that, of course, as Nextcloud or even as Matrix. And that's why it's good to do this, by the way. I think that's very nice to do this conversation.
Yeah, happy to have you in the conversation and to talk about similar topics that there are between Matrix and Nextcloud and everything decentralized, actually, because there are a lot of challenges in decentralizing things. We have another question in the chat, which is a bit technical, and I'm not sure it's the right time to answer that. It's about sharing files on Matrix that would be on Nextcloud. So maybe a bit technical, but we
Happy
can follow
to try.
up.
If I don't know, I'll just say I don't know.
All right. So the full question is, what does Nextcloud think about better integrated sharing files using the Matrix protocol? Share a file to Matrix, but the file actually stays hosted via a public share URL, but Matrix protocol only on Nextcloud.
So the file would stay on Nextcloud. I mean, that's how even our federation works. And Nextcloud has a federation protocol where you can share a file from one server to the other. But the file, it's basically a web dev mount. Talking technical here. So the file stays where it is. And I would say if there would be kind of a file sharing Matrix integration, I think that would be the ideal model, because yeah, I don't know. Our fundamental thinking is that the user who shared the file should stay in control. So, you know, that's why we don't cache the share on the other side, for example, because the moment then you would remove the file access, the other server would then have to, you know, comply with removing that. And I mean, it's all open source, so you can make changes and then do things that are not cool. So obviously you can always copy it, right? This is the internet. Once you shared something, it's out of your hands. But, you know, within reason, you should stay in control. And so this, I think, should be the model for that. How that can connect into Matrix technically, I don't know. I think you're only now kind of starting to develop a sharing protocol for data. So I don't know if it's yet at a level that you say, okay, let's talk about hooking that up into a other file storage technology.
All right, cool. You mentioned federation. I think Nextcloud has some federation capabilities, because when you set up an instance, a Nextcloud instance, basically it's your own instance. You upload your files. You are maybe the single user on that instance, but are you able to share things and I don't know, make comments on files, share them with specific Nextcloud users on other instances?
Yeah. So you can in the, you know, there's this share dialog in the sidebar where you can enter, you know, the name or an email address or a federated cloud ID, and that's essentially username at Nextcloud server, and like an email address. So you can share files with me with Jos at cloud.nextcloud.com, and I'll just get a notification the moment you share with another server. I mean, this can all be configured, disabled, etc. But if it is enabled, then when you share with another server, and the admin has enabled this, then the two servers will exchange address book. So if you don't want to share with my wife, then you just type in her first name and it auto-completes, and it'll automatically share with my wife on my server. So yeah, that's Nextcloud Federation. It works. I don't have a feature matrix in my head. I know that, for example, groups work. So you can share to a group, and a group can actually consist of users across servers. But beyond there, I'm not sure. I personally don't use it heavily. So I don't know, for example, to be sure about the comments. I would guess that it works. I mean, we have customers using this, you know, and that puts a little bit of extra pressure on these kind of features. So then they tend to work. And federation is also used for our global scale, which is kind of our architecture that you use to scale Nextcloud to large instances. And with large, I mean 10, 20, 30 million users. If you want to run a single Nextcloud server at that scale, you need global scale, which essentially that you build kind of like a cluster of clusters. It's a bit too technical to go deep into, but that uses federation in the backend to make all these servers act as one. And that's being used by some of our customers.
All right, cool. Just a note to the chat. So I see that I'm running. I could spend the whole evening talking with you, but we need to talk to others. So chat, if you have questions, feel free to ask them now. I do have a question. It might be a bit of a difficult one. It's about GDPR, because GDPR and federated system is a whole story. It's like the lawmakers didn't know that you can have federated systems when they created GDPR, so it can be quite complicated. When you share a file with somebody with a federated instance on Nextcloud, so can you have a guarantee that the file is going to be deleted on the other party's instance if you stop sharing it?
It doesn't go there. That's the whole idea behind our federation, right? So the file stays on your server. There's a web dev mount. So the other person will only retrieve it when they click like the download or the edit button. But as soon as your server is offline and they click the edit or the download button, nothing will happen because, they can't get it. So the file is never transferred. Well, the file is transferred because the moment, of course, they access the file, then it gets sent over. But it is not stored. It's purely sent over and then accessed and then saved back to your Nextcloud if you gave edit rights, and then that's it. So from that perspective, we don't sync the files. We just think that people should stay in control, and so we think that federation should work this way essentially. So there is no problem, I think, at least as far as I understand.
While we are on the topic of law and legal issues, so GDPR is a quite hot topic, but there is also DMA at the moment. I think Nextcloud joined the coalition, and you have another hot topic. So you have another coalition led by Nextcloud this time, which is on another topic. Do you want to talk a bit about that?
Our friends from Redmond, yes. I'll keep this short. But about, I don't know, less than a year ago, we asked the EU to have a look at some of the practices of Microsoft. I think most people know it, but now if you want to install Windows, you're forced to create an account. If you use an iPad and you are editing a Word document, then it uploads it to OneDrive. Period. You don't have a choice. You can't say, hey, but I don't want to use OneDrive. Forget about it. If you run Windows, there's OneDrive everywhere. Pop up here, pop up there. It's hard to avoid. This is, not really a fair market. And obviously, they have a rather large share in the operating system market. So we asked the EU to look at that from a competitive point of view. Microsoft, of course, has been caught doing this before with Netscape, famously, right, with the browser. The EU took action, took a while. But yeah, I think it's about time. It seems to me that this kind of behavior is back in full force. I think Teams is now by default, there on the taskbar in the new version of Windows. This kind of stuff. The thing is, of course, we can all build technology as tech companies and tech people, but there is a legal / community element to this, a society element to privacy. The GDPR was necessary because just technology obviously didn't do the trick, right? It was not like about half the world was using Facebook and the other half was using privacy respecting, decentralized alternatives. Everybody's using Facebook. So yeah, there is a legal side to this, and a society-wide side, an activist side, so to say. And we thought it would be good to. The thing is, nobody wants to do a complaint like that because they're afraid that Microsoft will steamroll over them, or they are a business big enough that even if they could survive that, then they're probably doing business with Microsoft, because I mean, everybody depends on them, and even the EU itself, right? I mean, can you imagine the German or the French government completely banning Microsoft? Then everything stops. They're all afraid. So we thought, well, okay, we'll stick out our necks. We'll find a couple of friends to support us in this, and we'll be the one to file a complaint. I mean, what can Microsoft do by us? I mean, there's no venture capital. We don't own our own source code. It's all AGPL. So, you know what I mean? It felt like there's plenty they can do. Obviously, they can kill us as a company, I suppose, but not as a project and not as people, hopefully. So I don't know. We thought, well, let's give it a try. And then after a while, when the EU fell silent for quite a while, we decided to also file a complaint at the German government, the Bundeskartellamt, I believe it's called. And yeah, we also went public to put a bit of pressure, hopefully, to make something happen again. And yeah, I don't know. I hope that this will help the politicians at least keep an eye on this. Yeah, because the DMA and the DSA are, of course, laws that are being discussed right now, which hopefully will help with this stuff. But don't underestimate the amount of lobbying these big companies do, right? It is not unlikely that the final wording of these laws will make sure that, Microsoft and Amazon and Google can all just stay within the lines of the law. Well, for small companies, it will become a bureaucratic nightmare, and it'll harm our whole economy, and maybe even actual self-hosting, as has been not fully the case. I think the GDPR, all in all, has been positive. But I mean, most smaller companies will probably disagree with that statement, because obviously they're just looking at the cost and they think, are you kidding? And yeah, it's I don't know, these things are difficult, and luckily there are lots of organizations from the Electronic Frontier Foundation and the Free Software Foundation Europe, and the Open Forum Europe, and others that are fighting the good fight there and talking to politicians that hopefully listen. Yeah.
So, in following up on that question, we have a question from somebody who really appreciates the initiative, and I do appreciate the initiative too, and who is asking how come the community can help you in that antitrust initiative.
Specifically in this, that's a tough one. I mean, in the end, the EU has to do the work here, right? If you talk about it, that's obviously good, and hopefully we'll be able to do an update about it at some point, and maybe other organizations can join us in the initiative. Those are all good things. But in the end, the complaint is there, and now action needs to be taken. I would rather, if you want to, be active politically, then look at like Open Forum Europe, and the FSFE and organizations like that. Those are the ones to talk to and to support with these things. I mean, obviously, using Nextcloud and Matrix and other open source products and sharing them and telling other people about it, this is always good. Don't get me wrong. But in a legal fight like this, look, we don't have an army of lawyers either. We have a very small army in general, right? So there are organizations that are focused on this more, and we work with them, right? We were supported by a couple of these, and others told us they support us but can't do that in public. So yeah, I hope that answers the question. I mean, it's not like we've opened a bank account for the nations or something. This is the EU will have to take action here, And if you want to call like your congressman or woman, then you should check with the OFE who that is and what issues to talk to them about. Yeah, they know more about it.
Right. So there are dedicated organizations like Open Forum Europe and FSFE, which are specialized in lobbying. So I don't really like the word lobbying, because we are used to, lobbying is usually for bad things. We hear about lobbies when there is something terrible to defend, but here it's for the right cause, I would say. Right.
Lobbying is just talking to politicians, and I mean, society needs to talk to politicians so they do the right thing. The problem is just when 90% of those people who do the talking are big corporations.
Because they have time to dedicate to that.
Yeah. Well, and money, right? They hire ex-politicians to do this work. This is the sad reality. I don't think in itself, I think it's fine. Politicians should listen to society. And even there, companies are part of society. Companies are important. I mean, they employ people, and we need to take care of our economy, etc. So even there, I don't have a problem. It just needs to be balanced. But at least the EU, like EU politicians, I think they all have to make public who they talk to and for how long and how often, which I think is really good. I think the most important thing here is transparency. Transparency is usually, well, let me put it this way. I mean, transparency is the one thing that authoritarian regime hate. So you should love it. It's the most important thing. And if a politician is talking 99% to big companies, there will be journalists who start talking about it, and then you should pay attention. So I don't know. I think there are some mechanisms that push back a little bit, but of course, all of us then have to pay attention. And in any country where, for example, there are no rules about this transparency, this is a thing to then talk to your local politicians about and say, hey, why does on the EU level everybody have to declare who they talk to? Why is that not the case in our local country? Because the EU is not even that bad in this regard. There are a lot of good transparency rules at the EU level. I'm not saying it's perfect. There's a lot of room for improvement, and this indirect democracy that we have at the EU, where like the heads of states and ministers are in a extra layer and all this stuff. I personally think there should be a parliament which is directly voted for right now, and there should be I don't know, maybe a directly voted for president or something of the EU. And this whole council thing, it's all a bit overly complicated and indirect, I think. But I don't know. I think the EU as a whole is a good thing. They're trying, and I know. I think even some countries in Europe can learn from the transparency that the EU tries to have.
Thanks for the complete answer. It's a fascinating topic. We could spend.
It is. Oh yeah.
We could spend the whole evening talking about it, but I'm wary of time. Alex and Gauthier, please get ready. It's going to be your turn to talk about YunoHost. Jos, thanks a lot. So thanks a lot to Nextcloud as an organization for providing such great software. I'm personally relying on Nextcloud, and I really love it because I can deploy it on my computer. Well, on my server, I have a fancy application that works on my phone. I like the fact that you are not judgmental, because I use an iPhone, and iOS is not free software, but I still can use free software from my iPhone, and I think that welcoming mindset is very much needed. Thanks for all the initiatives that Nextcloud is carrying outside of purely technical initiatives. The fact that you participate in the DMA lobbying, the antitrust action you have. So thanks a lot for all you are doing as an organization, and you as a person as well.
Well, thanks for inviting me. It was nice to be here, and I look forward to what the other projects have to share.
Excellent. Alex, Gauthier, are you ready?
Yes.
Please go ahead. If you have some slides, you can start the screen share.
Let's see. Yeah. Can you see my screen?
Yes.
Okay. So we were invited to talk about YunoHost and how it can help to decentralize internet by hopefully simplifying server administration. I'm here with Gauthier, and together we are both contributing to the YunoHost project. Myself, I'm more on the core aspect of the project, and Gauthier is in particular contributing to packaging matrix bridges, and so in the first half of this presentation, we were hoping to discuss YunoHost first, and then we wanted to share our experience with running a small community-operated service platform, which is called Sans Nuage, which is part of the Chaton Collective that we have in France, which was initiated by Framasoft to try to provide and create multiple service platforms which provide libre and privacy-respecting services. Sans Nuage is in fact built with YunoHost, and it's in fact quite close to. In fact, it's kind of the same organization as Alsace Réseau Neutre, which is associative non-profit ISP in France, and it is member of the FDN Federation, providing internet access and also VPS and VPNs. So to talk about YunoHost, basically the pitch of the YunoHost project is some people got mad that basically administrating a server was so complex, and the idea is basically to say that it's not acceptable that we try to fight the internet centralization and the GAFAM if we don't try to make it easy to maintain servers such that not just a technicality, it should be able to install and maintain servers. So that's the main idea behind YunoHost. So YunoHost is basically trying to be the Linux Mint of server administration, if you will, or the Ubuntu of server administration, in the sense that before Ubuntu or Linux Mint, well, Linux was mostly something reserved to a technical elite which knew how to do command line and so on. So the goal of the project is that first and foremost, things should be simple and they should be straightforward. Like if you want to install any app that you want to use, you should be able to have a graphical interface and just click install like you do like on a smartphone or I don't know on a desktop computer. Like why would server administration be complex? In fact, we think that if it is complex, it's mainly because nobody took the time to make it simple. So the second aspect of YunoHost, obviously, is that you become responsible with your own digital life because you own a server with your own data on it. You choose what services you want to run. And of course, you have also to handle the backup of your data, as we were discussing in Nextcloud just before. I wanted to highlight the fact that YunoHost is not just for noobs or non-tech people, if you will, because it's something that we see often in discussion online, like, oh, I know how to configure server, so I don't need YunoHost. But life is short, and maybe you don't want to spend all your life tweaking configuration files during hundreds of hours. And the second thing is that YunoHost is not just for self-hosting in the sense that owning your own stuff as an individual, but it can also be useful for, and it is useful for hosting service for family or friends or teammates or students, anything up to, let's say, 100 or 500 users. So clearly, it's not the same scale as Nextcloud, where apparently there are Nextcloud instances with millions of users. This is just not the scope of YunoHost. For us, 100 users is a big server. Maybe it could go to 1,000. I don't know, but we don't have so much experience with that kind of numbers. In terms of features, YunoHost is built on Debian. Well, this is a big list. I'm not going to go through everything, but YunoHost is basically a distribution built on top of Debian. You can install it on many kind of hardwares. You can administrate your server with a simple web admin. You can install more than 300 applications. Actually, we like to say that installation is the easy part, but we also, of course, under the upgrade, which is the complex part of servers maintenance. Of course, you can have Let's Encrypt certificate. We have the ambition to provide a fully functional mail stack. So yeah, also decentralizing email. We have a single sign-on mechanism, so you have several users which can access your server. They access your server via sort of a portal interface, and they are automatically logged in your Nextcloud or your any apps that you host on your YunoHost. We do provide a mechanism for backup and restoration, and recently we also added high-level diagnostic features, which tell you what's broken on your server and how you can fix it. We also recently worked on automatic DNS configuration, where you can interface with your registrar API. We provide decent security by following Mozilla recommendations. I also mentioned that we are containerless, which I don't know if it's a feature or it's more like just a fact. We don't rely on Docker or any container technology for various reasons, but maybe we can discuss this at the end of the talk in case people are interested. If you don't know about YunoHost, this is what the web administration looks like, and this is what the user portal looks like. We have various application package, as I said, more than 300. Of course, any app, any high-level profile application that is probably in the catalog somewhere. Here I just mentioned a few of them, and then I wanted to do a short demo of what YunoHost looks like in practice. So here I just installed YunoHost on a Scaleway VPS. Oh yeah, sorry, the interface is in French. I hope it's okay. Here during the initial installation of YunoHost, I need to choose a domain name. So I can either use my domain name, which I booked somewhere on the registrar, or if I don't have a domain name, I can also use something like something ending with nose.me, which is something that we own for the YunoHost project. But the nice thing about this is that this will be automatically configured right after the installation. So let's say OpenTech will save us, for example, slash demo2, because in fact I have another server which is called demo1. Here let's just pick any administration password. Okay, and then this will install the server during a few minutes. So to fast forward after the post installation, I have another server just on the side, which is already configured with OpenTech will save as demo1. And then here I am on the administration interface. If I want, I can create a user for Gauthier. So let's call it goat YunoHost. Here you will notice that when I add a user on one YunoHost, you automatically get a mailbox. So after I do this, Gauthier could perfectly open Thunderbird and configure this new email address in Thunderbird. I'm gonna choose a password for Gauthier. Here we go. So this is one thing I wanted to show, and second thing is how to install an application on YunoHost, because this is like the most important feature on YunoHost maybe. Here you can see that I already installed Nextcloud, but for the demonstration I will browse the App Store and choose Xtrace, which is kind of a very small application, which is okay for the demonstration because it won't take too long to install. Here I can choose a name for Xtrace. I can pick which domain it will be installed on and the URL it will be installed on. I can choose whether or not it's a public application. And there we go, it's installing. It should, it's a very small application, so it just takes a few seconds to install, but I could have picked Nextcloud. It takes like maybe 3 minutes, 4 minutes. Or any apps among this huge catalog of application. And now I can go to Xtrace, and Xtrace is just like a simple game, but you get the idea. I could browse to Nextcloud. So yeah, to demonstrate the single sign-in mechanism, I will go to the portal of YunoHost. Here you can see I installed these two applications, and when I go to Nextcloud, well, it doesn't work because this is a demo effect. Yeah, I had to refresh for some reason, but here I am logged in Nextcloud. Yeah, if you want to try YunoHost, you can try on our official demo anytime. I'm probably running out of time, but I wanted to give a few words about this diagnosis system that we introduced about 2 years ago. It tells you what's not working on your server. For instance, here I have the email stack where the reverse DNS is not properly configured, and if I click on details, I could see instructions on what I can do to fix this. Another thing that we recently introduced is the automatic DNS configuration. For example, if you booked a domain on OVH or Gandhi, you can add your API credentials inside YunoHost, and it will simplify the configuration of the DNS, which is like a big one of the big technical steps when you start setting up a server. And another thing is something kind of similar to Nextcloud P2P backup features. We have a similar mechanism which is based on Borg. Borg is a tool for remote, encrypted, and space-efficient backups. And currently we have 2 applications which you can install to provide backup to each other with friends easily. So just by installing this application on one side and this application on the other side, you can back up each other's servers. And here I put the small configuration panel that we have to configure this app. For the second half of the talk, I will hand over the mic to Gauthier.
Thanks, Alex. Do you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Perfect. So yes, I'll now talk about YunoHost and Chaton. So for those who don't know, Chaton, it's a collective, French collective of web service hosters that aim at decentralizing the internet. And so what we can do with YunoHost is to actually decentralize the internet, because it decreases the level of expertise. So there are many more people that can administrate a server. So for instance, I'm the perfect example. I started maybe 5 years ago to de-Googleize my life, and I just met these awesome guys. And so I started installing a server with YunoHost and hosting services for my family. And then I joined the association to go a bit bigger, to help some hundreds of people. And yeah, so basically a big drawback of decentralized networks sometimes is that they are much more too centralized. So they usually start with one server that is very famous, like Mastodon or Matrix.org, and it's difficult then to actually decentralize it. So this is what we try to do within the Chaton collective. So YunoHost helps us to have like individuals hosting for their family, or associations multiplying. So YunoHost can be seen as an OS to build a new association for hosting services. And we see that Chaton-like structures can be a middle ground between self-hosting and surveillance capitalism. If you want to see how to start hosting for friends or for family, or even bigger, you can go in on this link. Unfortunately, again in French, but there is some tutorial on how to start a Chaton with YunoHost. And yeah. Next slide, please. So for we have one example. It's like our ISP provider, ARN, Alsace Réseau Neutre, is hosting a Chaton, so which is called Sans Nuage. So you can see the services, the single sign-on page here with all the services. And we currently have 150 users. We are hosting 2 VMs with YunoHost, and we are thinking about opening a third one for hosting Jitsi. And we have we have 24 different services like Nextcloud, Etherpad, Open Sondage, so some Pulse app, RSS feed, RSS bridge, and yeah, Matrix also. Next slide. So now about YunoHost and Matrix. There are many apps packaged for YunoHost, Elements, Synapse, for instance, but also newer ones, Shiny, Hydrogen, and Bridges, Discord, Signal, and WhatsApp. So these are all working great, and there are also some that are currently being packaged, like Dendrite, and some Bridges, IRC, Telegram, Facebook. One interesting thing in YunoHost is that you don't only install an app, but you also pre-configure it. So for instance, if you click on install Synapse and then click on install Element, the Element app will automatically be configured to use the local Synapse server. And so you can do the same for Bridges. And in the future, we also want to auto configure the Jitsi instance to be used by the Synapse instance for video calls. And maybe one thing that the Matrix community could ask is What about Matrix Docker Ansible project, which allows to deploy all the stuff automatically? So it's unfortunately not compatible with the approach of YunoHost, so we cannot use it directly. But it's probably a different user scope. Like Docker and Ansible is more for system administrator, and YunoHost is more for random people like me. And but yeah, of course, YunoHost is a bit less scalable. Next slide. So now what we are doing or want to do within the Chaton Collective and Matrix. So we try to develop a strategy to ease adoption of decentralized instant messaging. So first we provide Matrix element as part of the platform, as I will show later. So based on YunoHost. We are also aiming at developing the tools to be user-friendly as WhatsApp, and we want to break the network effect by providing bridges also. So in practice, we are teaching people to use Matrix. So we are organizing kind of install parties. So basically organizing some real life events to show these awesome tools, and also developing some tutorials, some docs for end users. We have right now 8 public Synapse instances in the network, and it's developing. There are even more that require subscriptions. We packaged 4 bridges for YunoHost, so I was leading some of this packaging. And in particular, we installed Matrix WhatsApp on our Sans Nuage server, and there are many rooms bridged with IRC also. So in all, there are 12 Chaton, so 12 hosters that are using YunoHost among 90. Next slide. So we try to summarize a bit our experience with Matrix, and to think about what is a break for adoption for end users. So one of the first thing is choosing an instance. So we discussed this already, and one good example that we see is giantmastodon.org, which is a portal where you can read about the providers, understand if I'm like be confident that this instance will be suited to you and secure enough. So we think it could be interesting to develop such a platform. Then we think it's still difficult to find contacts and federated rooms outside of Matrix. So what we are thinking about is maybe deploying an identity server within the collective to decentralize the identity servers from Matrix.org. And also we are trying to better or deeply integrate our servers so that the users can find users from other Chaton easily, and also that they can use their phone book to find contacts directly. And finally, the key management is still confusing. So I think this is a node issue. It has improved a lot in the last years, but still. So we think we have 2 solutions. The first one is to teach people in real life how to use a password database and then store the keys in the database. And we are maybe asking the community here if there is some good solution, or there could be some good solution, for instance, using Firefox things to save the backup keys for encryption, or maybe would it be possible to have the backup keys saved automatically on a trusted server, like for instance our Sans Nuage instance. That's something we can discuss later. And if you want to know more about the collective and what we are doing with Matrix, you can see the forum or also we have Matrix space with all the with many members of the collective inside it. Next slide. So finally, I wanted to do a little demo also. So I said we implemented the bridge Matrix WhatsApp on our Sans Nuage pool of services, and to make it usable by end users, we developed an own little robot which we called ARN Messager. And the idea is that using these bridges, you need to know a bit the command line and read a doc, and so sometimes it can be a bit complicated, and we try to simplify the use by just having this simple command. So WhatsApp. So basically, if you have a Matrix room and you are a Sans Nuage user, you can bridge a room with this command. I will just do a little demo later. If you want to see this little robot that allows to put people in contacts, you can see this repo here. And maybe just before the demo, another idea that we had last weekend at a federal meeting, French meeting, we were thinking that we could actually kind of bridge phone calls. So basically, if you have a room that is bridged with a Matrix room that is bridged with Signal and WhatsApp, and that you have you do a phone or video call, then you could just send the phone number, the VoIP phone number that is linked to this room through the bridges, so that people can call even if they are on another messaging system. And so we are discussing this with some other associations to see if we can get some VoIP numbers and set this to improve user experience. So now demo. I think, yeah. So I will share my screen. I think it should be this one. Nope. Ah, yeah. So do you see my screen?
Yep.
All right. So this is the YunoHost portal of Sans Nuage. So you see we have some services that are open, so free of charge, and then some more that as for instance Matrix that are that require to connect. So I'll just connect here. So I just entered the SSO now, and I will go on chat with Matrix. So here I should move to the Element app, and I want to sign in with the SSO. So I will click here on continue with CAS and grant permission. And so this is done. I'm now connected to my Matrix account through the SSO. And now I wanted to demonstrate this bridge that we developed. So the first thing I have to do is to create a new room. So for instance, I create a room. I decrypt this because we are not supporting encryption right now for the bridges. And so I have this this new room, and I will add our robot, which is called ARN Messager, to the room, so I can talk to him. So he should reply to me. He's giving me the commands that I can type. So for instance, here I will say, okay, I want to create a WhatsApp group bridge with this Matrix room. So I just type this. So hopefully it will work. So then it's basically in the background, it runs some commands in administration mode to the bridge. I'm supposed to get the invite link that I can send to my WhatsApp contact then, but I don't know, it's still not super stable because we did an update recently. Sorry. So this is the user experience. Then I can also, yeah. So here you get the invite link that you can send to your WhatsApp contact to join this chat. And another way is like just to do this. So I will just add this number. And I can show you what happens now on WhatsApp. Sharing my camera then, if it works. Can I show the camera? Somehow the camera doesn't work anymore. Okay, I don't know. Well, I can at least just show how it works. Yeah, so that's the message I sent from WhatsApp. I wanted to show it on my phone, but the camera of my laptop doesn't work. So that's it. So that's the user experience that we developed for bridging Matrix and WhatsApp, and we will soon provide also the Signal bridge, so that people can even bridge WhatsApp and Signal conversations with this kind of user experience. So thanks for your attention. I think, Alex, you have a conclusion slide.
Yeah. So yeah, to summarize what we discussed, we're working on YunoHost, and we hope that it drastically reduce the technical cost of operating a server. As we said, maybe not everybody wants to own a server because it remains something technical and that you need to invest time in. But building community operated structures like Chaton or like SonNuage can be a middle ground for people who wants to escape surveillance capitalism. And so we discussed how our experience of building such a structure, and we discussed this improvement on the WhatsApp bridges that Gauthier developed with other people in our community. So thank you very much.
All right, thank you. That was a very detailed presentation, and we had quite a few questions in the community. So the first one is pretty simple: is what does Wayno mean?
Oh yeah, so Wayno is like internet meme. It's like an internet meme, like the Wayno guy. Maybe not everybody knows about it. I don't know, but like the meme is like, why something, like why don't you do this? And this was the name of the project. Like, why don't you host your own apps? Like referring to the fact that it should be easy, and you shouldn't have to go to the GAFAM to app services and data.
We had another question, which is, was YunoHost developed to be lightweight?
Yeah, I think so. I think this is one of the feature. Like we don't expect people to run YunoHost like on a 64 gigabyte RAM server. It's supposed to be I mean, one of the key features is that it should be installable on small ARM boards like Raspberry Pi 2 or even one.
Right. And another question. So you might be anticipating a bit the next question. Another question was, if you have multiple YunoHost nodes deployed on the same top-level domain, is it possible to configure them to work together? And is it possible to have SSO across multiple domains, across multiple nodes?
Not really. It's not designed this way. I don't think as a project we want to go down this road because like it increases the complexity of everything.
Right. It's not your target. Your target is not to have scalable deployment that can grow with an enterprise or etc. It's just more for small scale organizations and people who just want an all-in-one that works, if I got it correctly.
Yeah, really, like if you have a team of people at work and you need tools to work together, like you should spin up a YunoHost and like it should be fine, but you cannot. I mean, for us, 100 user is a bit spooky. 500. We know of people who have 500 users, maybe more, but clearly, if you go beyond, if you start reaching 1,000 users, we probably expect that things will start not working properly, even though we don't really have any super good experience with that kind of numbers. But the performances will probably not be super great.
There might have been a bit of confusion when you were talking about the chaton you are running. You said you wanted to deploy the second or third instance. So are they sharing the same domain, or are they? I don't know. It's not a cluster.
Yeah, Gauthier probably knows that.
It's just for right now, the two instances that we have are just for different domains actually. But then, I mean, you can configure. I mean, the idea is just to install another service on another instance, and we can configure subdomains then to be able to integrate the whole thing in the same portal.
Right, so it's a bit of an edge case here. It's not the primary intended purpose of YunoHost, is it?
Yeah.
Right.
That's the point. Usually the services are all installed on the same instance, but here we know that Jitsi is a bit heavy, so we don't want to install it on the same instance than all the other services to risk any crash or something. So
yeah, because it will, if I understand correctly, it will be on a different domain. So you can have a specific application on another machine, assuming that you don't need the same user base, because the user base on one machine, then it won't be connected to the other machine. And
yeah, it will just be a public Jitsi instance additionally to the rest. So no need to connect to the user database.
Makes sense. And I know it's called OpenTech will save us, but OpenTech is not just about OpenTech. There's also policy around it. And my next question is about all the different applications. I think you said that we can have like 300 applications or a bit more than that on YunoHost. So the two questions I would have is how can I add my applications to YunoHost? And do you review, proofread applications? Just need to be open source? Do you have a set of constraints, or can we add anything to YunoHost?
So our current policy is to only accept open source and free applications. We kind of started to accept not totally free applications, as I like to call them, which are like applications with exceptions, special exceptions. I don't have any specific in mind, but basically they are free on open source, but slightly modified. Like I don't know, I don't remember exactly, but I think something like MariaDB is maybe not totally free. I don't remember exactly. Like there are some business clause or something like this. To add an application to the catalog, you can do, well, first you have to create the package using the packaging format, and then you can just do a pull request, and we will. I don't think currently there are any extensive checks, but we will probably check that this is an open source application and that it doesn't do anything crazy. We do have some automatic tests which validates that everything works in the nominal case, like installation and upgrade and backup restoration, that kind of stuff.
Right. So talking of backups, some people don't know how to do backups, and it's a best practice. So we had an example of using Borg to make it to get the backups, but is YunoHost trying to teach the user the best practices by having a properly designed interface that tells them, by the way, you should set up backup, because if you didn't set up the Borg backup thing, you might face issues at some point?
I think currently no, but I think it's definitely something that we want to aim for. Basically, the goal is to have Borg integrated in the core of YunoHost, because it's it makes much more sense that let's say the vanilla backup system, which only creates a big archive of everything that needs to be backed up. Borg makes a lot more sense, even in local usage, like not backupping to another server. So I think once or maybe while we integrate Borg inside YunoHost, we will also try to think a bit more about backup policy and try to really encourage people to back up. Like you could have a check in the diagnosis system saying, "Oh, you didn't do any backup during the last 3 months, maybe." I don't know.
Okay, and you have mentioned during the presentation something that really caught my curiosity, because one of the most difficult problems when you are self-hosting and you are not necessarily a professional is doing all the networking in addition to deploying the software. So you need to do some port forwarding in your router to get the ports open on your router, and then you need to get a DNS name, a domain name that is pointing to your router, and hope that you have a static IP, and if you don't, you need to do the DNS, etc. So you mentioned that you have 2 domains, I think, that people can use when they use YunoHost. How does it work? And could you envision partnerships with some DNS registrars to monetize, basically, or to at least fund the product?
So yeah, indeed, I didn't mention all those questions. I think they are partially solved by the existence of the diagnosis systems, which really helps you with in notifying that you did not forward your port on your router. Well, in this case, this is a VPS, so there is no need for port forwarding. But if I was self-hosting at home, it would complain that the ports are not properly exposed, but here they are. If it wasn't, then I could click on detail, and it would explain me. It would point me to the documentation of YunoHost and tell me that I should probably go to my router interface and add some port forwarding rules. Same goes for the DNS configuration here. It checked that the records are okay, but if they were not, it would complain that this record does not have the correct value, and you should configure the record for to a different value. So I think this really helps, and this was a really major improvement in the last 2 years of YunoHost to have this system. Because before this, on the forum every day you would have people saying, "Oh, I cannot access my server, probably because port forwarding was not okay, or the DNS records were not okay." And nowadays, people are really able to autonomously resolve these issues. And so in terms of automatic configuration, because here I used a nos.me domain, which is automatically configured, which is in fact a feature that we have since a long time. But I could add a domain like I don't know, something like matrix.org, let's say, which doesn't really mean anything because I don't really own matrix.org, right? But you could anyway do this, and then if I go to the diagnosis, it will complain that the DNS records are not right. But if I did own matrix.org, and maybe it is on OVH or Gandhi, well, I could add the API credentials inside the YunoHost interface so that the configuration would be automatic.
Okay, and it's
yeah. If
perfect.
I go to this part of the interface,
You're sharing your screen?
Well, it's hosted on Cloudflare, like it automatically detected this. So I could here add the API credentials if I were to own matrix.org, which I don't. And then I would be able to
Alex,
access.
Are you sharing the screen, or do you want to share?
Oh yeah. Am I not sharing my screen?
Nope.
I can see your screen.
I cannot.
Okay.
My bad.
Yeah, that's it basically.
Right, and there's one thing I've not asked you. How is it funded? Do you make money from YunoHost?
So we are a fully volunteer team at the moment. We do receive donation approximately. Well, I have a slide on this actually at the end of everything. Yeah, we do have approximately. Well, our rough estimate is approximately 500 euro per month donations, and we also did have some grants from NLNet and Code Lutin, which is a French enterprise collective. We are still thinking about how to distribute this money, especially the donation, which cover they cover kind of the infrastructure costs, but we are thinking about, like, I don't know how to say this, but proper way to redistribute the money among contributors. So right now the money basically sits on the bank account until we define something. Yeah, I don't know if we have enough money to
hire somebody.
We should think a bit more about this.
All right, really cool. So I'm very happy and impressed of everything you have made simple. That is far from trivial. Even the DNS part, the fact that you have a DNS section, and that you can provide a domain for people who don't even know what the domain is really impressive. The fact that it's exclusively volunteer work makes it even more impressive. Thanks a lot for this fully detailed presentation about YunoHost. Do you want to share one last thought before we have Neil presenting P2P Matrix?
I was thinking maybe we should share a link for this presentation, because we in fact add many links inside the slide, but nobody can click them because you don't have the slide. I don't know if you can share them on the Matrix room or something.
Definitely, yes. You can send them to me or share them directly in the Matrix room.
Yeah, all right.
Excellent. Thanks a lot. And Neil, are you ready for your presentation?
I am, yes. Let me just share my screen.
Excellent.
Right, so hopefully you'll be able to see that now.
I am.
Right, perfect. So I've called this Moving In with P2P Matrix. So for a little bit of background, I work for Element on the P2P Matrix project, and I also work on the Dendrite home server as well. And Really what I wanted to talk about a little bit today was on the theme of self-hosting, obviously, is the things that we're thinking about, the things that we're doing with P2P Matrix to try and make it much easier to bring Matrix as a self-hosted service literally back home. So first of all, if we have a look at the current landscape of messaging applications, spot the pattern here, right? They're all centralized, they're all proprietary. And lots of people are being coerced into using services that don't respect their privacy. And we know that a lot of this is because of the network effect. More often than not, you're going to try and meet your friends and family where they are. And there's partially just because there are lots of people out there that just don't know that there's an alternative. These, centralized proprietary systems, they quite often change unpredictably from underneath users. Sometimes they get security breaches. Sometimes they go offline unexpectedly. Or the thing that we can pretty much guarantee is happening is that they're selling your personal data to advertisers. Right on the other side of the spectrum, though, we believe that open and decentralized technologies are the ones that really spark joy. And Matrix is an example of that. It's an open and a decentralized technology. It's an open standard. It's a well-defined, well-specified standard. It's decentralized. It's federated. And anyone can run services like this. It's possible for anybody to just go and stand up a Matrix home server in principle. And probably more important than that is that anybody can actually audit what it does and how it works, rather than just having to go and trust that this big company is actually doing what they say they will. As we all know, this isn't always straightforward. The migration isn't always easy, and users often run into problems when they try and migrate away from these proprietary services into open and decentralized alternatives. Even right at the beginning of the decision-making process, how do you know that your needs will be met by an open and decentralized alternative to something that you've been using for all of this time? Is it possible for an everyday user to understand how it works or what it does? If there are multiple implementations of something, and in the Matrix space, this is quite prevalent. We have lots of clients. We have an increasing number of server implementations. How do you pick one? How do you compare them? And if you don't want to run a server of your own, we've raised this point already, that it becomes very difficult then to know how to pick a server. How do you know which server to use? How do you trust the people that are running a given server? And then there's just the really big overarching question, which a lot of people would ask, which is, why would I self-host to start with? Now, for an audience like ourselves, we know the benefits of self-hosting. Open and decentralized services are great for self-hosting. You can run them wherever you want. You can run whatever you want. You're responsible for your own data rather than just having to hand it over to someone else. And something that's very important, especially when it comes to business continuity as well, is that open and federated protocols and their implementations aren't just going to stop working overnight because some company wakes up one day and decides they want to abandon it. But it's not all easy, because where does another start when they want to build a self-hosted system? And admittedly, the risks are higher when you aren't really sure if you can actually configure and secure that system properly. Are you prepared to continue to maintain it on an ongoing basis? Are you hosting it at home, or are you running it in a remote data center? And if so, are there actual monetary costs involved in that? So trying to fix the self-hosting problem to make it easier for everyday users means that we need to address a number of these issues. So first of all, we really need to build something that's easy for anybody to get started with. Plug and play, even, because there are plenty of people out there who just will look at a complex distributed system and won't attempt it if it's anything more difficult than plug and play. It's got to have a low maintenance overhead after the initial setup. Ideally, it would be self-updating, self-maintaining, because what we don't want to happen is that the user will grow to resent switching to a self-hosted alternative because the ongoing maintenance becomes a burden. And it needs to solve real-world problems for the user, and it needs to either do it just as well as the proprietary services that they're used to, or they need to do it better, or otherwise the users just simply won't stick around. So when we've been designing P2P Matrix, we've been thinking a lot about these questions, and we've been wondering, is it possible to have our cake and eat it too? Is it possible to build something which ticks all the self-hosted boxes, but is easy enough for everyday users to run at home and to benefit from. The hot term in the industry for this at the moment is edge computing, and it's literally pushing compute power as close to users as possible, as opposed to running things in data centers far away. And quite often, this will involve people literally putting things inside their homes. If you have something like smart light bulbs or smart heating, you'll quite often have a little hub plugged in somewhere that contains the brain of the system. If you're lucky, they might even work offline. And it's important that they're supported as an overall platform, because we need these systems to pretty much update themselves. We need them to stay secure. And we need to make sure that if there are any maintenance headaches, that we take those away from the users as much as possible. On the other end of the spectrum, on the more sort of hobbyist level, Raspberry Pis have become wildly successful because they're really, really affordable, quite well documented for people who either know what they're doing or are willing to learn. And they're powerful enough for a lot of applications. So in that regard, they've filled a niche which didn't really exist before. But the problem is that being cheap and cheerful is really only solving half the problem, because there's still the issue there that the average person just simply wouldn't know what to do with it. So we consider self-hosting very much to be a first-class concern for peer-to-peer Matrix, because ultimately, if everyone just continues to use the matrix.org home server in a peer-to-peer world, then somewhere on our mission we've failed. We've either failed because it's not usable enough, it's not robust enough, it's not scalable enough, it doesn't tick whatever the right boxes are. So the whole goal for us is to make it easier for people to own their communications on their terms. And possibly that means that they're doing so without really realizing that they're self-hosting necessarily, or not in the traditional sense anyway. Because we really don't want people to fall into the same trap like we've discussed earlier, where we, like what happened with email, where everybody has a Gmail account, no one bothers with anything else, and we lose all aspects of, all the benefits of decentralization. And admittedly, normally the reason that people centralize around services like this is out of convenience. So we need to make sure that what we're building is convenient. Now, in peer-to-peer Matrix, hosted home servers don't necessarily go away. There are good legitimate reasons for wanting to keep some of them, but the goal is to level the playing field out a lot more. And we want it to be possible to run Matrix home servers outside of data centers, and we want it to be feasible to do so. Maybe we want to run them on mobile devices, maybe on some kind of fixed appliance. Maybe it's a little software package that you install on your PC and you just leave it running. And running things at home is great, especially while you're at home, but sometimes people leave the house as well. So we need to make sure that whatever we build works just as well if something's hosted at home when you go out. The experience needs to be just as good. So none of this really works unless we have some kind of ubiquitous network connectivity between all of the relevant participants of the Matrix network. And we've been working on a project called Pinecone that tries to solve this issue, because ultimately, if your Matrix home server lives at home, you need to be able to get back to it while you're out and about. You need to be able to reach other servers over the Federation and to have them reach you, or otherwise nothing will work. And we need that promise to work, regardless of whether it's in a data center or on a mobile device, whether it's, regardless of where it's hosted, we need to be able to make that guarantee. And our provisional answer to this is an experimental overlay network, which we're trying to build, that will solve this problem, even for people that are stuck behind NATs or restricted firewalls and probably don't know how to do anything about that. We don't really want to have to push the burden of things like port forwarding onto users, because it's not practical a lot of the time. And I did actually do a talk at FustStem this year about Pinecone, so if you have specific interests about how Pinecone works, what it does, the problems that it tries to solve, have a look at that talk. So something like Pinecone really means that a lot of possibilities open up about where a Matrix home server can live. Our initial P2P demos that we built put a Pinecone node and a Dendrite home server straight onto iOS and Android devices, and it mostly worked. Likewise, we've also been asking whether what we need to do is follow more the smart home kind of route, which is where we build what is effectively a Matrix appliance. a little bit of kit that you plug in somewhere. It just works, it's plug and play, and it gets you started with Matrix, operating as a home server that you just leave running at home. And we can ultimately take advantage of the fact that lots of people have computers at home as well that might just be sat idle. So if we have devices that are online all of the time, that's overall good for the Federation. It's overall good for a number of Matrix issues that we are still to solve. And it also deals with the issue of how, where we can generate push notifications for mobile devices for when you're not actively connected to Matrix at that given time. So our current P2P demos, running them on phones, it works. There are obvious problems with it. Battery life being the biggest one. Background services are not battery life friendly. And Matrix at the moment still very much expects that nodes are online a lot of the time. That will really have to change, and that's something that we are looking at. Spotty connectivity is another one, especially if you're out and about. If you go and get on a subway or drive through the countryside, your connectivity is not going to necessarily be as good as it would be walking through the middle of a city, and we have to be able to deal with those scenarios as well. And then there's just the bit where iOS and Android can just be outright obtuse at times. They don't particularly want background tasks running. iOS will just outright kill them after a couple minutes of the app being in the background. Android is a little bit more liberal on that, but is heading the same way with more Android releases where they don't particularly want things just running in the background, sucking up battery all the time. Home servers on computers, of course, that solves some of the problems. Much more likely to have stable power and connectivity, assuming no one comes along and just randomly shuts it down. But we're also aware of the fact that, if you're using the computer for something, especially something that's resource intensive like gaming, that we don't want to be that task running in the background that's just sucking away at your CPU or your memory and becomes that thing that everybody just says, you just need to go into the task manager and kill that. So we're also aware of the fact that that only really works if we can be sure that we're only using a very small amount of resources to make it function. Home services appliances, like we're talking something similar to like a smart home hub of some description. It's something that we've been considering. We don't have anything prototyped for this really, but it's probably going to be one of the more promising solutions, which is where you just have something that you plug in. It's less likely to be switched off by accident compared to something that you're actually using every day. If you just leave it somewhere, plug it in, leave it alone, that would be the best thing for uptime and for services running on it. Hopefully some consistency in the hardware platform there means that it's easy for us to provide not just application updates, but also platform updates. If you have some little hub that just updates itself, ticks over, hopefully people won't really have to worry about updating it manually, doing any sort of manual maintenance, or worrying about whether if they have left it alone for too long, whether it's going to be vulnerable to some security problem or some issue that way. And I think this is probably about the closest thing that would get us to the plug and play dream of something where you literally just take it out of the box and plug it in and bam, you've got Matrix. Portable identities, we've talked about this a lot in the past. We haven't really solved it yet, but this is one of the big things that we also need to solve, because identities at the moment in Matrix are tied to the home server that they were registered on. And we really want to be able to decouple that, because there are loads of Matrix users out there. And I'm thinking, users like matrix.org users are a good example. People that need the freedom to move from one server to another without losing everything that they have, without losing their identity. And it's a much easier sell to say, right, well, Matrix is going to go peer-to-peer, if we're not telling people that they need to abandon everything that they have on their current Matrix identity in order to make it work. So we have done a little bit of exploration on this. There are a couple of draft MSCs floating around in the Matrix world. One of them is MSC 1228, and the other one is 2787. But it is the very core principle that we need to be able to do this in a way that doesn't cause users to lose everything when they want to migrate. And we need to make a number of changes to the Matrix Federation protocol as well, because at the moment, the current Federation protocol is full mesh. That can end up being quite heavy. It can use quite a lot of network traffic, especially in large rooms. And if we're expecting people to be able to run this at home or closer to the edge where connectivity might be more constrained, it might be slower, it might be less reliable, we really need to solve that issue. So we want to reduce the amount of traffic that it takes to make Matrix actually function, and eliminating that full mesh requirement is a really good place to start there. And the other thing is that we just need Matrix to be more lightweight and faster overall. And the Dendrite home server it's getting faster and lighter with every release. And it's becoming much more likely that we can use it to actually target low power platforms, the type of thing that you can just take out of the box and plug in and worry that it's not going to massively increase your energy bill. So there's a lot of work going on there. And we will basically have to look at the entire Matrix stack from top to bottom about how we solve these issues, how we can make Matrix more appropriate to move out of data centers. So our big sort of headline here really is that our final vision for P2P Matrix is that it will be easier than ever to self-host Matrix. And as I mentioned before, the dream would be that you might even be able to do so without even really feeling like you're self-hosting. We want to challenge the idea that people have that Matrix Federation needs to centralize around big servers. We want the experience to be good, and we want people to feel like they will actually benefit from it, the fact that it's becoming a more decentralized system, and that self-hosting has actual tangible benefits that you can touch and feel. And we want to do so out in the open. Everything that we do is open source. Dendrite is open source, Pinecone is open source, the Matrix specification, that's widely available. We need to be able to deliver on our promises in the same open source way. So myself and the team, the next generation team within Element, we're splitting our time at the moment on trying to solve these problems and to get Dendrite to where it needs to be, to get Pinecone where it needs to be. So really, at this point, just stay tuned, and thank you for listening.
Thanks a lot, Neil. That was a very detailed presentations. I'm a bit upset because I came here for answers and you just gave me more questions.
So, let's see if we can get some of them answered, shall we?
Yeah, but I on a personal level, I find it interesting that those questions are actually being asked, and that we are not just going, peer-to-peer is the future, is going to be on phone, period. So I'm happy that there are issues, and you have spent time trying to identify them. Those are questions I'm actually happy to hear about. But I have some questions for you.
Go for it.
One of the questions is, can you think of use cases that are for more than individuals?
So enterprises generally tend to want a level of control over their Matrix installations. And that's why I've sort of said in the presentation that big static home servers aren't necessarily going to go away. But there are also actors out in the world. And I'm sort of thinking in particular, there might be certain groups of people, certain organizations that really might just want to blend into the background. They just want to disappear into the noise. So P2P Matrix is a pretty good way of targeting people who don't necessarily want the footprint of a big installation. And the benefit for individuals is obvious, because they get to own their information, they get to operate something on a much more ad hoc basis. Might even be able to get it to work if you had a bunch of people that just walk out into the woods and want to talk to each other and still have the whole Matrix experience functional. But I do believe that there is scope even for bigger organizations who might want to benefit. Disaster relief is another example. If you walk out into a section of the world where connectivity is bad, infrastructure is bad, you're still going to want to be able to take advantage of any connectivity that you can build quickly on an ad hoc basis.
So when you say any connectivity, you don't necessarily mean internet. It could be over Bluetooth, Wi-Fi, or...
Right, so that's something that we've experimented a little bit with in the existing demos. So we tested 3 different things in addition to working over the internet. The first was Bluetooth Low Energy, which has the benefit of being really widely supported. I don't think there's been a mobile phone in the last probably decade that hasn't had Bluetooth support. There is Wi-Fi, as in you are connected to a Wi-Fi network with a bunch of other devices. Whether that network is connected to anything else is irrelevant, because you can still just discover other nodes locally on that network segment. And then the third thing that we looked at, which was actually probably more impressive than the other two, but unfortunately proprietary, was AWDL. And that's the wireless medium that iPhones and iPads use for AirDrop, where you literally perform service discovery with nearby devices, regardless of whether you're on the same Wi-Fi network or not. And we've had Pinecone working successfully over all three of these. And we can mix them. So if you have some devices that are local to you on Bluetooth, some that are connected to a Wi-Fi network, and then you just happen to have some iPhones lying around that are AirDrop capable, we have the ability to bridge all of these together into one coherent, sorry, the saying about smart lighting, that's into one coherent network.
Excellent. That's exciting. And you mentioned low bandwidth at some point, I believe. Is it in conflict with the low bandwidth effort of Matrix, or is it a parallel effort that could benefit from it?
So the low bandwidth work that's taken place in Matrix so far has really come from two different angles. There's the one angle, which is that you've got a remote server, you've got possibly, you open up your Matrix client for the first time and you've got these big sync responses, and you don't want to waste all of this time and all of this bandwidth transferring full fat JSON. So there's the low bandwidth side for the client API. But similarly, we can apply similar tricks to the Federation API as well. And the low bandwidth proxy that we demonstrated, I think a few months back now, which basically does CoAP and CBOR for the client server protocol, actually also works for the Federation protocol. It's definitely in scope for us because we want to be able to make Matrix work with the lowest, the lowest set of resources possible. And if that means that we can trim some of the fat off the protocol literally at the byte by byte level, that makes it easier and more feasible to run it over slower transports like Bluetooth, then yeah, we will absolutely want to do that.
So low bandwidth and the fact that there is connectivity over different networks, not necessarily the internet, could make Matrix P2P a good fit for environments where you don't have the internet, whether it is because of a disaster, because of a war maybe, or because you're just in a very rural area and you don't have access to the internet. So it's nice to have that for instant messaging, but could P2P Matrix and SNEC be foundational work for something else? I'm thinking, for example, of local first applications, if that makes sense to you.
So it's certainly possible. Now, Pinecone and Matrix are kind of, even though they're tangled together in a lot of ways, they're kind of attacking this problem from two different angles. Pinecone is literally, how do we build a network topology up which provides end-to-end routability between all reachable participants when you can't necessarily predict the network topology? So let's use the disaster relief as an example. You step out into the wilderness or wherever some natural disaster has happened. It could be a built-up area, it could be completely rural. You've got a handful of devices and you've got some wireless connectivity. You might be able to take some access points or things with you that can run off a battery. You might be able to run some cable, but you've really got no idea before you get there about what that topology will look like. And Pinecone is designed to deal with that. It's designed to take any network topology, any set of links that it can, and to build up a single network. Matrix, on top of that, is basically taking advantage of the fact that no matter how you're connected to all of these nodes, you can still talk to them. So if you were to build some application that used Matrix as its foundation, there's no reason that couldn't work over peer-to-peer Matrix in the exact same way that it works over the Federation today.
Excellent. And we have two questions. So there is one question from the community, which is pretty linked to one I had in mind. The question from the community is, did you consider OpenWRT with the idea to install Dendrite on routers? So for people who are not familiar with OpenWRT, it's open source software on specific routers, so you can install various apps, and Dendrite is a Matrix server. And the linked question I had is, would P2P Matrix on an appliance require to do things like port forwarding on routers that are not specifically made for that?
Right, so I'll deal with this as two separate questions. So the first question of OpenWRT, there is absolutely no physical hard reason why we can't do that. An OpenWRT router is a Linux machine for all intents and purposes. We can run Dendrite on it. The practical consideration there is that most router equipment tends to be low power. They tend to have very wimpy CPUs, and you maybe get like 64 megs of RAM if you're lucky on a lot of them. Certainly that's not true across the board, but for a lot of the target routers that people tend to run OpenWRT on, they probably find it was too restrictive. But that said, you can run a Pinecone node without running the accompanying Dendrite node, and it can still provide backhaul connectivity on behalf of other nodes. And Pinecone nodes, I think the last time I looked, I think I ran an individual Pinecone node on my machine. It used about 6 megs of RAM. So they're very lightweight, and we would definitely see benefit in having packages available for platforms like OpenWRT, where you can say, yeah, it might not actually be appropriate to run a full Matrix home server there, but we can certainly take advantage of the fact that this device has connectivity. It probably has connectivity wirelessly. It probably has a WAN port. It might have wide connections to other things. We can use it. And then your second question, if you can just remind me.
My second question was about appliance. If we have Matrix appliance, do we need to have port forwarding in routers that were not meant for hackers?
That's right, yeah. So that's one of the goals of Pinecone to solve. So a Pinecone node can make an outgoing connection to another Pinecone node somewhere else in the world. And with that connection, can still receive incoming traffic over the overlay network. So if we had some kind of appliance that you just plug it in, it's got a list of Bootstrap servers built into it, so that the very moment you plug it in and it gets access to the internet, it tries to make some connection out to the rest of the world. We don't need port forwarding inbound, because as long as the peering outbound is successful, you still get bidirectional traffic flow over the actual overlay network. That's useful not just for port forwarding, but also if you have more restrictive networks, and I'm thinking, sort of educational and corporate networks where just about everything gets blocked at a perimeter firewall. You really don't want to have to rely on actually accepting incoming TCP connections at all. So we've very much designed Pinecone with that in mind.
All right, we don't have any other community questions. Is there anything you want to add before we conclude the episode?
Just that our usual chit-chat for all of this takes place in the #p2p@matrix.org room. Feel free to join us there. If you've got any questions, just please reach out.
All right, thanks a lot. So a huge thanks to all of our speakers tonight, because we had interesting and different point of views. We had Jos on Nextcloud, who tried to balance how things are between individuals and enterprise, and how a company that is vendoring software can try to find the balance between the two. We had Alex and Gauthier, who were talking about YunoHost, and which is a solution for small scale organizations, and how to make things simple for individuals. And we had your take finally on the best server is no server, but it can still be a server on an appliance. So it was a very interesting evening for me regarding self-hosting. I'm still a self-hoster who is probably going to rely on a VPS in a data center for a while, but that's because I really enjoy problems. I hope people who listen to the episode tonight learned things. We're going to leave links to the various Matrix rooms, or links to the website of the different projects in the Matrix room, and in the description of the episode on YouTube. Have a nice evening, everyone, and thank you for your attention tonight. See you around.
Thank you. Bye.